tonight. We've been putting on these events for about a year and a half now, and it's nice to be able to get in without there being a barricade of protesters at the door blocking our entrance. So thank you for coming, and I'm very glad that it was easy enough to physically access the building. It's a good start to tonight's event. We do have a very important guest of honor with us, Dr. Provocative, but I just wanted to go through a few housekeeping items before we get to this talk. I wanted to mention that throughout the evening and then going forward with this campaign to establish the Canadian Centre for Men and Families, the long name for a campaign, we will be doing a lot of marketing and social media in particular. And if you'd like to tweet about tonight and support the campaign, we've developed a hashtag. For those of you familiar with Twitter, it's hashtag CanadianCFM, Canadian Centre for Men and Families, so use hashtag CanadianCFM. We are quite active on Twitter, at Equality Canada, and on Facebook, facebook.com/EqualityCanada, on top of our YouTube and website. So there's a lot of ways you can follow CAFE. I also wanted to point out this is a fundraising event, so if you haven't yet, please do make sure that you check in with one of my colleagues, Malcolm, who provided the introductions in the green shirt there, Michael, where's Michael? Put your hand up. He's way in the back. Adam with the tube there at the front, and just do make sure that you pay your entry fee, and of course we encourage you to join CAFE and to donate to support this important cause. On top of that, we're going to be having a silent auction. This is the first time I've hosted a silent auction, so I'm not quite sure how they work, but I do know that they involve people putting their names and their pledged amounts onto a sheet. So there's a sheet for you to put your name and your pledged amount. I don't know if it's more complicated than that, but I think that's good enough. So if you would like to bid on that painting over there, propped up on the wall, there's a little bit of a bio and information on the painting itself and on the artist. Fairly prominent Canadian artist, in fact, and the painting, I should say, was donated by an individual who's been very involved in advocating for men and boys issues for many years, who was asked to remain anonymous. So I will respect that wish. But we thank this individual for his contribution. And there's a few other items that you can sort of negotiate with us on a price. But do please participate in the silent auction as we try to raise money for this important initiative. I did want to mention quickly just a couple of remarks about why we think this campaign to establish the Canadian Centre for Men and Families is so vital and so urgent. And there's a couple of points I think that should be made. The first one is that there are many, many issues that pertain to boys, men, and fathers, which you can read about in the proposal and the project brief that I provided. But I think it's important to make it clear that this is a collaborative and a positive initiative. It does not seek to replace existing social justice movements. It seeks to complement and balance existing movements and existing social justice work that's being done by women's groups and by groups pushing for equality in the racial spheres or in spheres related to equality of any kind of demographic group. So we really see CAFE as complementing these existing initiatives, and we look forward actually to working positively and collaboratively with many existing groups. And I could go into detail about some of the groups that have already endorsed and joined this particular project. But I think it's also important to make it clear that one of the other rationales for this initiative is that, frankly, as I alluded to in my introductory remarks, it has been difficult to do our programming on campuses and in other venues. It has become clear, unfortunately, that universities and other public settings are somewhat hostile to this new perspective. And we've come to appreciate, in terms of the feedback we've gotten from our advisors, that it's really important that the time has come for a dedicated space where we can talk about men's issues, boys' issues, and fathers' issues really on their own terms, and not through other established ideologies or other sort of group identity politics. It's just about research and evidence-based understanding of the needs and well-being of boys, men, and fathers. So I think those two reasons are really what ground the importance of this particular project. But then there's a third one, and I'll just be brief about this. A few months ago now, a man by the name of Earl Silverman took his own life. Now, does anybody know Earl? A few of you? So Earl was long a champion for the need to have domestic abuse shelters for men. And over the course of his life, he pushed government at many levels to acknowledge the reality of this problem, and unfortunately didn't get very far. And towards the end of his life, he became very distraught, came to see that there was, unfortunately, in his opinion, no hope. This initiative is to give hope to that dream of Earl's. And I just want to read to you this section in memory of Earl Silverman that is in the proposal that is circulated on your tables. It says that Earl Silverman, a man with a passion, who had felt the personal trauma of partner abuse from his ex-wife, hung himself on April 26, 2013, in the garage of his recently sold home. Earl had dedicated his life to raising awareness of male victims of intimate partner violence. For 20 years, Earl was a persistent force lobbying governments at all levels to obtain funding for male victims of intimate partner violence. The Canadian Centre for Men and Families is driven by the goal of growing an institution that will give perpetual meaning to Earl's lifelong efforts. So, for those three reasons, we really feel that the time has come for the campaign to establish the Canadian Centre for Men and Families. So I really encourage you to support the campaign, to enjoy yourself tonight, to come and ask questions, and to find out how you can get involved. And just a last word from me. I'm rather involved in a number of nonprofits, and for a while I thought that it was important that I sort of put my involvement in CAFE a bit in the shadows, a bit off the radar. And I don't think I'm going to do that anymore, because I feel that it's not consistent with my belief that these issues are perfectly important issues. There's nothing wrong with talking about these issues. I think that this project is vitally important. We're going to hear from other people why they think the project's important and what CAFE means to them. But I'm just going to tell you from my part that I'm not going to be as quiet or as hidden about my feelings in this area, because I think it's important for all of us to step up and speak honestly and, here's the awkward part, financially support an initiative whose time really has come. So thank you for being here tonight to share with us. Now, for the individual you're really here to hear and see, Professor Lionel Tiger. Professor Tiger is a Canadian-born, American-based anthropologist. He is the Charles Darwin Professor of Anthropology at Rutgers University. He's a consultant to the U.S. Department of Defense, and he contributes to a number of publications, including Psychology Today and the New York Times. And of course, we know he's the author of many, many important books in this area, such as Men in Groups and The Decline of Males, and other books beyond men's issues, of course. It's a real pleasure to welcome Lionel Tiger. He's been an ongoing support and contributor to CAFE, and I'm just really, really excited that he's here to join us. Professor Tiger.
Thank you very much. Somebody's getting wired for light here. I don't know what this is. We're obscuring the light. I'm delighted to be here. I thank you for the invitation. It's not only a worthy cause, it seems to be an essential cause that you're engaged in here. I would, however, make the reflection that this is an old story. My first book, and I'm not going to be an old fart reminiscing, but I want to show you that these are old stories, old issues, and it's time to clear them up and try to achieve some success in approaching an immensely vexing issue of both intimacy and public policy. When my first book came out, Men in Groups, I made the mistake at the time when the feminist movement was beginning to generate some passion and purchase in the mainstream media. I made the mistake of saying that perhaps there were differences between males and females. This was regarded as quite remarkable because by then we all knew that there were no differences between males and females. There were cultural differences depending on which magazine you read, what your reference group was. There was nothing biological about biology. Maclean's magazine did a cover story about my book and my assertion that there were differences, madam, between boys and girls. And to illustrate the literal nature of these differences, they had carefully disguised, but clearly viewed, people on the cover, an appropriate male and an appropriate female. This was so inflammatory to the feministas that they began to picket Maclean's, which they did for about 3 weeks, going around and around in this block, picketing what seemed to me completely absurd. I remind you, this was in 1969. We've been there. So when you talk or you complain that people are picketing you, this is a very old story, and somehow we have to try to understand compassionately and not angrily why this feminist assertion has been so successful and why there has been no corresponding male assertion of any consequence. One thought I can toss out is that, and here people I know will accuse me of making what are called sexist comments that is to say that distinguish between males and females. Women really enjoy talking about themselves, and they enjoy talking about themselves with other women. Men do not. Men do not like to talk about themselves. They don't think there's any point to it. They want to get on with it, whatever it is. Drinking, watching the game, fixing the tire, doing whatever. There is a real sex difference in the capacity and enthusiasm with which males and females approach identifying their issues. And what has happened is that females have been unbelievably successful in identifying their issues. And as a consequence, as I mentioned to a couple of people here at the University of Toronto, there are some 40 courses that relate to gender. 38 of them are about females and gender studies, which is about females, and 2 on males, one about gay males and one on transgender males. Males don't matter. Nobody wants to talk about them. Even the males don't want to talk about them. So we're looking at a community with a profound inability to conduct thoughtful discourse. How do we approach this? Well, obviously, as Justin Trottier has said, this is not constituted as an aggressive organization to destroy the feminist groups and all of the legal changes which have been so important and valuable in ensuring equity for everybody. Nobody wants that. Certainly not the fathers of girls or the mothers of girls or fellow citizens of girls. We want everybody to have an equal, colorful, and interesting set of options in life. However, when we look at what we're doing, and Justin has already mentioned it, and it's become a favorite metric of everybody, if we look at who gets graduated from publicly supported university and higher education institutions, it's disproportionately female. Now that seems to be politically remarkable, and I can hardly wait for a female politician to stand up and say, this is wrong, we've got to stop it, we've got to get more men in university and through university. Let's have some affirmative action for men. As a matter of fact, in many American colleges, some of which I know something about, there is such affirmative action. Colleges will admit males with poorer records because they want to have a more egalitarian student group. Currently, the ratio is often 60% female, 40% male. And as I mentioned again to several of you, a friend of mine was taking his daughter around colleges to see where she might want to go. Her first, and in fact her most important question was not what's the classic course like, what are the requirements for honors physics. She wanted to know what's the sex ratio. Because this has now become a very important issue for young men and women, especially for women who are at a point when they have to begin thinking not only about production, production, what job are they going to do? But reproduction, are they going to reproduce? Now, big issues. Let me talk about two things that are very poorly understood. The first is nobody has quite undertaken the task of analyzing why, for the first time in recorded legal history, more than 50% of babies in wealthy communities are born to women who are not married. I'm not making a moral statement here, I couldn't care less. But it's very interesting that we make this shift, and it's very significant that we don't fully appreciate or understand the issues that result from this activity. The second part, which is directly related to that, is by far the most important biological innovation in modern human biology, which is female-controlled contraception, female-controlled secret contraception, the pill. We don't yet begin to appreciate how important it is that women, and I'm not saying they shouldn't, I've always thought they should, but we didn't understand how important it would be that women could make that decision. Very important to them, obviously, and to the children they now want, not children that they didn't expect and they have to cope with. But what's happened to the males? In my Decline of Males book, I somewhat glibly, but I now think actually more thoughtfully than I knew at the time, I paraphrased Karl Marx, who, as you may remember, wrote, "Workers are alienated from the means of production." What has happened now is that males are alienated from the means of reproduction. And the two equivalences are serious. I know that with students, for example, and some of you in universities may experience the same thing. Not in the engineering and hard sciences faculties, because their people know that they want to learn something and they have limited time to do it, so they do it. Males and females, but especially males. In the social sciences and literary sciences, the guys don't quite know what it is they're doing or why, and they lose a sense of edge. The females, on the other hand, are studying harder, and you know why? Because they're studying for two. 85% of women have children, and these women, without thinking it through, without analyzing it, somehow sense that if they're going to have a baby, then they have to do it themselves. And that motivates them to study in a manner which guys cannot do, because what's the point? Most of the women will not tolerate them because they're not, they're young anyway, the same age that is. And the females simply disparage them. In minority communities, for example, in the US where I live, among African American females, right from 5 years of age, the assumption is that the males are not useful. They won't work, they don't graduate, they get into trouble, they're expensive, and who needs them? And so you find in cities like Cleveland and Gary, Indiana, Des Moines, and so on, 70 to 80 to 90% of babies born in this community, particularly, are born to single women. And you know the other deal? These women have a deal with their mothers. Because if any of you are parents, some of you then will be grandparents. If you're in the parent business, the thing you want most of all is grandchildren. And these gals make a deal with their mothers as follows. Okay, you get pregnant, you have the baby, I'll help you take care of the baby, I'll work as I have to get the money, you can get a job as a learn how to be a hairdresser or whatever it is you're going to do, and we'll make it. And that's the family system in that community. Perfectly healthy. It actually replicates the West Indian family system, which I encountered when I worked at Ghana for a year doing my dissertation, where the operative supporter of a child is not the biological father, but the mother's brother, because he at least knows who his genetically linked person is. It's a more complicated issue, perhaps, than it may seem, but I would like to go off that, except to once again stress that as a species, we have undergone a tremendous shift in a very short period of time in which one sex, for the first time in nature, has the ability to control the destiny of our species. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm merely emphasizing it's a big thing. And people such as you in this room should attend to the big things like that, because from approaching the big things, small victories will occur. And by small victories, I mean removing some of the lunacies in the legal system, which I've heard about tonight, which say that women can get legal aid if they claim harassment by men, but men can't if they claim harassment by women. The best thing that has happened to the feminist movement is that women went through gender studies programs and they were unemployable except to work for members of parliament, members of Congress, and senators, and could then concoct all of these schemes which now become so difficult to overcome because they're very well made. I won't even begin to go into how this works out, but for example, in the US, there's now legislation passed saying that the laws governing sexual harassment no longer need to meet the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. The preponderance of evidence is enough. Thank you very much. Well, somebody crafted that who felt that this was a desirable form of human innovation. I don't mean to complain. I'm sorry if I sound whiny or really irritated. I'm not. I'm very concerned as a citizen, as a parent, and as a grandparent, and as a person who does scholarship, who tries to understand things, because it seems to me we're on a course now of such importance with so few maps, and not even the idea that we need a map, that it's dangerous. So again, I'm not good at the fundraising business, especially for myself, I'd like to point out, but it seems to me that this is a very valuable moment in the history of this community, in the histories of all of you, as people who can make a difference, and not only a difference, but a succinct and strategic difference, because you're beginning to deal with behavioral bedrock, which is how do men and women operate, how do men respond to a shifting world, a new university system, a new college system, a new undergraduate, primary school system, and approaching these kinds of questions seems, to me at any rate, not only increasingly valuable, but unquestionably valuable. I mentioned in several of the radio interviews I did today, and this appeared also in the article in the Toronto Star, I had mentioned somewhat glibly, but not so glibly, that boys in school are given Ritalin in order to turn their behavior into more like girls. In many schools in the US, and I don't know quite the numbers in Canada, but in some US schools, 90% of the victims of Ritalin are boys. 90% of the students in a school are given medication to make them able to function in school. You instantly have to ask the question, is it because there's something wrong with those 90% of the boys who can't deal with the system, or is the system to be questioned? I'm I'm in favor of questioning the system, not drugging the children. And it's this kind of collection of issues which, when you put them all together, when you put the fact that children grow up without fathers, children are medicated early on with long-term consequences to the physiology we don't fully know yet, it's too soon. It seems to me at that point, at this place, people have to make a difference, they make a personal difference, they contribute to everybody else and to themselves and to their own lives by helping out this group of hardworking, unpaid, thoughtful fellow citizens. Congratulations to those fellow citizens. Thank you.